By the time the fog rolled in from the harbour each evening, Brooks House looked less like a home and more like a memory that hadn't accepted it was dead. Its granite steps were chipped, its shutters hung crooked, and the brass knocker had gone green with salt and neglect. Tourists still slowed at the iron gates and took photos, because the Brooks name had once meant old money, old charity, old certainty. In Greyhaven, names were a kind of currency, and some spent better than others. The Brooks name had gone into public debt. Sophia Brooks stood in the side parlour, patching torn linen around a cracked window frame because the staff had been reduced to 2 part-timers and a groundskeeper, and because calling a contractor invited questions her mother preferred to ignore. Across the lawn, beyond the dead rose beds and the leaning sundial, she could see the harbour lights begin to blink awake. Somewhere downtown, someone was probably still talking about her brother's trial. The photos of him led in handcuffs, the headlines about investor fraud, the careful words from the family attorney about misunderstanding and tragic error. Somewhere else, someone was probably still talking about her engagement, cancelled 3 months before the wedding, after her fiancé, Evan Dalloway, son of a state senator and grandson of a judge, called her at midnight and said, with the practiced gentleness of a man protecting his polling numbers, that he could not carry her scandal into public life. She had said nothing, hung up, packed his letters into a hatbox, and slid them beneath the attic stairs. Now she spent her mornings at the Greyhaven Historical Society, restoring brittle hymnals, maritime journals, and family Bibles for people who smiled politely and left exact change in envelopes so she wouldn't mistake the payment for charity. She was good at the work. Patient hands, clear eyes, no need for applause. At home, applause had never been on offer. Her mother, Eleanor Brooks, sat in the breakfast room with a silver coffee service and 3 local papers spread before her like legal exhibits. Eleanor was beautiful in the way carved ice could be beautiful. Precise edges, no softness left. She read every mention of the family, even the gossip columns pretending to be civic commentary. When Sophia set down the repaired account books from the pantry shelves, Eleanor didn't look up. "Mrs. Kellum called," she said. "The Preservation Board has reconsidered your application for treasurer." Sophia paused. And no. A beat. Only the clock above the mantel, the gulls outside. Eleanor lifted her cup. "You are the reason doors close now. Do not expect me to pry them open." The words were not loud. That was always worse. Sophia nodded once because she had learned that argument only sharpened her mother's composure. "I have to be at the society by 8. Of course, we all have our duties." By noon, she was in the Society's conservation room with a magnifying lamp and tweezers, teasing mould from a 1791 shipping ledger while rain tapped the skylight. Mrs. Carver from the archives brought tea and didn't mention the newspaper folded beneath her arm. Mr. Bellamy, who chaired 2 non-profits and most conversations in town, walked past and gave Sophia a kind smile that lasted exactly long enough to be seen. On her way back that evening, Sophia took the greenhouse path to avoid the front drive and found Noah repairing the rusted latch on the west gate. He had arrived 2 months earlier after the previous grounds crew was dismissed for budget discipline. Noah never offered a surname unless required. He wore a worn canvas jacket no matter the weather, and his hands were cross-hatched with old cuts and pale scar lines. He spoke little, noticed everything, and moved with the contained economy of someone accustomed to making himself small in dangerous places. Most people in Greyhaven treated him as invisible staff. Noah seemed to prefer it. "You missed a spot," he said without looking up, nodding toward the mud on her skirt hem. Sophia glanced down and laughed softly. "Occupational hazard." He tested the latch, listening to the click. "Occupations usually pay enough for clean repairs." Mine pays in gratitude and tea. Dangerous compensation model. She leaned against the greenhouse wall, breathing in wet earth and rosemary from cracked planters. I hear your model is also unstable. Mother says you over-order gravel. Noah's mouth almost smiled. Your mother says weather is a personal insult. It startled a real laugh out of her. For a moment, the house behind them receded. The expectations, the verdicts, the long hallways full of portraits that seemed perpetually disappointed. Noah stood, wiping his hands on a rag. Storm tonight. Don't use the north stairs after 10. Rails loose. I'll avoid all dramatic descents. His gaze flicked to her face, then away. Good plan. He knew when she hadn't slept, knew which hallway light buzzed out before dawn, knew to set a thermos outside the library on mornings she left early for the archives. He asked no pitying questions, offered no strategic advice, made no speeches about resilience. In a house of performances, he was the only quiet thing that felt true. On the anniversary of her grandmother's death, the sky cleared to a hard, cold blue, and the solicitor arrived at precisely 4 o'clock. Mr. Alistair Pembroke had served 3 generations of Brooks women and dressed like law itself. Charcoal suit, spotless cuffs, expression engineered to survive both funerals and tax hearings. He stood in the front hall with his hat in hand while Eleanor descended the curved staircase in pearl earrings and disapproval. Sophia, Eleanor called, and somehow made it sound like a summons and a warning. The solicitor requires you. In the library, Pembroke waited until the door shut before producing a narrow sealed envelope, embossed with a wax mark Sophia recognized. Her grandmother's crest, a stylized lantern. This instruction was lodged in private trust, he said, to be opened only in your presence on this date. Eleanor held out her hand. Give it here. Pembroke did not move. It is addressed to Miss Brooks. A thin line formed at Eleanor's mouth. Sophia broke the seal. Inside was a single typed page, signed in her grandmother's slanted ink. At midnight tonight, Sophia Brooks must be present in the Brooks House Library for opening of File Lantern, witnessed by acting solicitor and independent custodian. Failure to appear in person will trigger immediate transfer of designated assets to the Greyhaven Civic Literacy Trust. Irrevocable. Sophia read it twice. Designated assets? Pembroke folded his hands. I'm not authorized to disclose contents prior to execution. Eleanor exhaled through her nose, bored more than surprised. This melodrama again. Mrs. Brooks, Pembroke said carefully, the trust instrument bypasses current household administration. Bypasses? Sophia felt the word land between them like dropped glass. Eleanor turned to her daughter. You will sign whatever is put before you. We are done discussing this. Mother, it says I must be present. At midnight, Eleanor cut in this house where you already live. How inconvenient. She moved to the desk calendar and made a notation with brisk, elegant strokes. Tonight we are hosting the Harbour Children's Gala. Trustees, donors, press. You will be in attendance until close. I will not have another public scene because you decided to indulge sentimentality. It's grandmother's instruction. It's dead people controlling living schedules. Pembroke cleared his throat. If Miss Brooks is not present at the stated hour, the assets transfer permanently. Eleanor didn't even look at him. Then they transfer. Sophia stared at her. You'd rather lose whatever this is than let me hear it? Eleanor's gaze finally met hers, flat and unreadable. I'd rather preserve what remains of this family from your improvisations. The gala swallowed the house by 7. Florists, caterers, board members, piano music drifting through rooms that hadn't held honest conversation in years. Sophia stood in a pale blue dress chosen by her mother's assistant, smiling through introductions as people misremembered her into safer shapes. "How are you keeping? Such a difficult year. Your mother is extraordinary, isn't she?" At 11:30, Eleanor took the microphone in the ballroom and began thanking sponsors one by one, stretching each acknowledgement into a thread designed to hold Sophia in place. Sophia checked the antique clock above the mantel. 30 minutes. At 11:42, she slipped from the ballroom into the service corridor, kicked off her heels and ran. She cut through the pantry, out the greenhouse door, and into the night air. Gravel bit her stockinged feet. The side path was unlit, slick with mist. As she reached the carriage drive, a flashlight beam snapped on. Noah stepped from shadow. "You're late." She stopped short, breathless. "How did you—" "Mister," Pembroke asked for a second witness if access was obstructed. He held out a pair of boots. "Put these on." Music thudded faintly behind them like another life. Sophia jammed her feet into the boots and followed him through the kitchen entrance, up the back stair, and into the darkened library at 3 minutes to midnight. Pembroke stood by the hearth, watch in hand. Beside him was a steel dispatch box on the table, old and scarred, with the lantern crest stamped into its lid. At exactly 12, the lock clicked open. No money, no jewels, no deed to save the roof. Inside were 3 bound ledgers, 2 bundles of letters tied with blue ribbon, a key wrapped in wax paper, and a sealed legal folder labelled File Lantern, Executor Clause. Pembroke opened the folder and read aloud, voice steady. "By authority of the late Margaret Brooks, all dormant assets of the Lantern Foundation, estimated principal value $7.4 million, are hereby placed under provisional sole executor appointment to Sophia Elaine Brooks, contingent upon proof of origin regarding the 2011 Brooks account sabotage and associated fiduciary misconduct. Existing household administrator Eleanor Brooks is expressly excluded from supervisory authority in this matter." The room held stillness like impact. Sophia heard the words but couldn't feel them yet. 7.4 million. Sole executor. Prove sabotage. 15 years ago. Before her father died. Before her brother learned to charm investors and dodge audits. Before every dinner in this house became a controlled burn. Pembroke closed the folder. "Miss Brooks, if you accept appointment, you assume investigative obligations and legal exposure. If you decline, the foundation dissolves into civic trust at end of term." Noah said nothing. He didn't need to. His presence was a steady pressure at her shoulder, the only anchor in a room that had just tipped sideways. Sophia placed her palm on the ledgers, as if to prove they were solid. "I accept." By morning, the house knew. Not officially. Nothing in Brooks' house travelled by official route first. Sophia's keycard failed at the accounting office door at 9:03. At 9:15, the driver informed her that vehicle privileges had been temporarily reassigned. At 10, she overheard Eleanor in the sunroom, voice low and pleasant on the phone. "I'm afraid Sophia is not well. This inheritance business has made her erratic. I'm managing it." By lunch, 2 board members had emailed to suggest she rest before making public-facing decisions. At 2, Eleanor summoned her to the small drawing room where important humiliations were conducted off-stage. "I've spoken with Harold Vane," Eleanor said, as if continuing an earlier conversation. "His son Daniel is newly partner at Whitcomb Bank. Stable, discreet. If you insist on this executor fantasy, marriage would provide the oversight needed to reassure trustees." Sophia stared. "You're arranging my supervision. I'm containing damage. I'm not marrying a banker so people can pretend I'm harmless." Eleanor adjusted a cufflink. Harmless would be an improvement. Sophia felt anger rise, hot and unfamiliar, not the exhausted resentment she carried like background pain, but something cleaner. Grandmother excluded you. Eleanor's eyes cooled another degree. Your grandmother was sentimental at the end. You, unfortunately, inherited that weakness. She stood, signaling dismissal. Sign nothing without my review. Speak to no press, and if you insist on chasing old ghosts, understand this. An executor can be removed for moral incompetence. Greyhaven has a very flexible understanding of morality where disgraced daughters are concerned. The threat was elegant, almost legal. Sophia left before her hands could shake in view. In the rear courtyard, Noah was coiling hose by the stone cistern. He took one look at her face and handed her a mug of coffee from a thermos without comment. "They've started," she said. "I figured. Cards frozen, car gone. Mother's building a file that I'm unstable. She offered me a husband as a containment strategy." Noah leaned against the cistern, expression unreadable. "Do you want out?" The question was plain, no rhetoric. Escape route offered, no judgment either way. Sophia looked towards the west wing windows, where her mother moved behind glass, like a silhouette in a museum display. She thought of her father's name, permanently dimmed by whispers about missing funds he had never had the chance to answer. Thought of her grandmother hiding a foundation behind coded files because she knew what resistance would look like. Thought of the town waiting to see whether Sophia Brooks would fold on schedule. "If I walk away," Sophia said, "the trust transfers and whatever happened 15 years ago stays buried under everyone's good manners." Noah nodded once. "I don't know how to prove sabotage," she admitted. "I restore books, Noah. I don't prosecute ghosts." He glanced toward the carriage house, then back to her. "Ledgers are still records. Records tell on people eventually." A small silence. Wind off the water, sharp with salt. "Help me," she said, and hated how much the words cost. His answer came without pause. "Yes." From the back steps, the house looked enormous and tired, a monument to reputation built on foundations she no longer trusted. Inside it were locked rooms, curated histories, and a mother who would rather lose millions than lose control. Outside it, a town ready to call her reckless the moment she stopped obeying. Sophia wrapped both hands around the hot mug and let the heat sting her palms awake. Midnight had handed her a fortune made of paper and accusation. If she failed, she lost it all, along with the last chance to clear her father's name. If she fought, she could lose the house, the little social footing she had left, and perhaps the only fragile piece in her life. She lifted her chin toward the carriage house where forgotten files slept above old stalls and dust and dry rot. "Then we start tonight," she said. Noah set the hose aside and took the mug from her before she could spill it with trembling hands. "Tonight," he repeated, as if fixing it in place. "After dinner, traffic dies. Fewer eyes on the outbuildings." Sophia nodded. She crossed the kitchen yard barefoot in his borrowed boots, climbed the service stairs, and changed into trousers and a wool sweater she didn't mind ruining. When she came back down, the house was all polished light and controlled voices. Eleanor was in the music room with 2 trustees and a decanter. Sophia kept to the corridor shadows, moved through the scullery, and slipped out the rear door just as the grandfather clock in the hall struck 8. The carriage house stood beyond the old orchard wall, half swallowed by climbing ivy. Once it had held 6 horses and a carriage lacquered in Brooks black. Now it held rusted equipment, stacks of cracked terracotta pots and a smell of oil and old rain. Noah had already pried open the side door. Inside, he lifted a lantern and led her past collapsed tack cabinets to a narrow stair in the back corner. "Watch your step on the 3rd riser," he said. "It shifts." "You've been up there before." I checked the roof leaks. That was plausible. It was also incomplete. At the top was a low loft room she had forgotten existed. Plaster walls, one dormer window, an iron stove long dead, and a work table dragged to the centre. Noah had laid out the midnight materials with almost surgical order. Ledgers to the left, letters centre, legal folder right, blank notebook open, pencils sharpened. Sophia stopped in the doorway. "You did all this in an hour?" "2." He glanced at her. "You change slowly." She should have laughed. Instead, she sat and opened the first ledger. The entries were neat, old-fashioned columns in blue-black ink. Date, donor, amount, allocation code. At first glance, it looked like routine foundation disbursement. Then she noticed the repetitions. Different donor names, identical transfer amounts down to odd cents, clustered just under reporting thresholds. The same 3 allocation codes cycling in a pattern that felt too regular for charity and too cautious for theft. "Read me codes that start with HL," Noah said, already flipping through letters. She did. He wrote them down and built a table, grouping by date. "Look at this," he said after 10 minutes. "Every quarter end these spike, then vanish the day before external audits." Sophia ran a fingertip along a line item, HL-19/Mariner Youth. Mariner Youth closed in 2009. So this payment in 2011 is a ghost transfer. Could be clerical carryover. He slid one of the blue ribbon bundles toward her. "Then your grandmother was writing very dramatic letters about clerical carryover." Sophia untied the ribbon. The first letter was addressed to Margaret Brooks from a woman named Celia Ward, former finance secretary, if Sophia remembered right. The ink had feathered with age. M. "I cannot sign this quarter packet as instructed. Voucher support missing for Harbour Learning disbursements. Eleanor says to proceed for continuity. Advisor insists all originals are in off-site archive. I won't be made liable for invented receipts." Sophia's pulse kicked. She reached for the next letter. "Celia. Hold your copies. Trust no one in-house with archive access. If I am correct about RM, this is not sloppiness. It is staging. RM." "Who's RM?" Sophia whispered. Noah looked up. "Your mother's advisor, Richard Mather." The name dropped cold into the room. Richard Mather had attended every Brooks dinner worth photographing for 15 years. Always mild, always useful, always carrying 2 phones and a smile that never moved his eyes. Sophia turned pages faster. Shell donations, reversed entries, handwritten initials in margins that didn't match the signatures beneath them. By 11, their notebook held 3 pages of anomalies and one terrifying conclusion. Someone had siphoned lantern money in slow, elegant increments and built a paper trail designed to collapse on Sophia's father's desk. She leaned back, rubbing her eyes. If this is real, they didn't just steal, they framed him. Noah's jaw tightened. Looks that way. The wind pushed at the dormer. Rain began in soft ticks. Sophia reached for the legal folder and scanned the executor clause again, slower this time. Halfway down, in language so dense it hid in plain sight, she found a line. "Executor may be removed upon substantiated petition of incapacity, criminality, or moral incompetence." She gave a humorless laugh. She already threatened this. "Who?" "My mother." Sophia handed him the page, as if she knew the exact phrase. He read it, then set it down carefully. She might. The lantern flame wavered, throwing their shadows long against the wall. Sophia looked at him over the spread of her grandmother's hidden war. "How do you know to map codes by quarter end? How do you know what phrases in these clauses matter? Groundskeepers don't usually pass trust law." Noah met her gaze and, for one beat, looked as if he might answer honestly. Then he said, "I've worked for people who hid things in paperwork." It was not a lie, it was not truth either. Before she could push, a floorboard cracked downstairs. Both of them went still. Noah blew out the lantern and moved without sound to the stairhead. Sophia could hear only rain and her own breath. A minute passed, then another. Finally he returned, relit the lantern and said, "Cat, or someone who didn't find what they wanted." Sophia swallowed. "They know we're looking." "Assume yes." He gathered the letters. "We don't leave originals here after tonight." "Where then?" "Somewhere your mother doesn't control locks." By the time they carried the files back to the house in 2 canvas tool bags, it was after 1. Sophia entered through the laundry corridor and nearly collided with Mrs. Finch, the night housekeeper. Mrs. Finch blinked at the bags, then at Sophia's muddy cuffs. "Miss Brooks." "Old plumbing schematics," Sophia lied, "for insurance records." Mrs. Finch's expression said she had kept richer people's secrets than this for longer than Sophia had been alive. "Then I saw nothing," she said, and moved on. At breakfast, Eleanor did not mention muddy boots. She did not need to. She was already weaponizing silence at scale. A sealed envelope waited beside Sophia's plate, embossed with Whitcomb Bank. Inside was an invitation to dine with Daniel Vane and family, annotated in Eleanor's hand. Thursday. Wear navy. Do not improvise. Sophia folded it once and set it under her water glass. Eleanor buttered toast. "You didn't attend board outreach calls this morning." "No one invited me." "I'm inviting you now to behave like an adult." Eleanor sipped coffee. "The trustees are anxious. They're hearing you've been rummaging through storage and making accusations about records you're unqualified to interpret." "Unqualified by whose standard?" "By any standard that keeps institutions solvent." Sophia pushed her chair back. "I'm going to the Historical Society." "You no longer have a house vehicle." "I'll walk." Eleanor looked almost pleased. "As you like." By the time Sophia reached town, rain had turned to sleet. At the society, she found a second envelope at her conservation table, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside, a photocopy of the executor clause with one sentence highlighted in yellow, "Moral incompetence," and a typed note beneath it. "Greyhaven does not reward women who make scenes." No signature. She stood very still until Mrs. Carver asked if she was all right. Sophia tucked the paper into her apron pocket and said yes, because there was no useful answer to that question in public. At 4, Noah met her by the greenhouse with an umbrella and a look that meant trouble. "Someone was in the loft," he said as soon as they were under cover. "Lock plate scratched, 2 drawers emptied, nothing obvious taken." Sophia pulled the anonymous note from her pocket. "They're not subtle anymore." He read it, expression flattening. "You told anyone about the clause?" "Only you." Pembroke read it aloud in the library that night. "Then the room wasn't as private as we thought." She thought of old vents, servants' corridors, doors that never fully shut in Brooks' house. "Can we move everything tonight?" "We move now." They spent the next hour transferring ledgers into archival boxes disguised as gardening supply shipments. Noah drove the utility truck himself because her access had been revoked. At the west gate, the guard, new, hired last week, checked Noah's ID and barely glanced at Sophia. Humiliation could be theatrical. It could also be bureaucratic. They took the boxes not to a bank vault, but to the Historical Society's basement map room, where humidity controls hummed and the director owed Sophia 3 years of rescued manuscripts. Mrs. Carver opened the steel cabinet without asking what the boxes held. "If it survives 1820 ship manifests," she said, "it can survive your family." On the drive back, sleet hissed against the windshield. Halfway up Harbour Road, The brake pedal sank soft under Noah's boot. He downshifted hard, guided the truck toward the curb, and let it grind to a stop against a snowbank 6 feet from a stone wall. Sophia's shoulder slammed the door. What happened? Noah killed the engine and sat listening to the metal tick cool. Lines cut, he said quietly. You can't know that from... He was already out in the sleet, kneeling by the rear wheel with a flashlight. Sophia followed, shaking. A thin, dark trail marked the undercarriage. When he looked up, rain running off his brow, there was no uncertainty in his face. Brake line was sliced, clean, not road damage. Her stomach turned. Who would? Someone who prefers accidents to paperwork. Back at Brooks' house, Eleanor was in the front hall instructing florists for another fundraiser. She saw Sophia's wet coat, Noah's grease-stained hands, and lifted one brow. Truck trouble? She asked. The brakes failed, Sophia said. The line was cut. Eleanor accepted a box of white roses from the florist without looking at her daughter. Then file a maintenance report. Sophia stepped closer. Someone is tampering with records and vehicles. Eleanor turned, finally giving Sophia full attention, and smiled in a way that chilled more than anger. Sophia, if you're going to accuse people, do try to choose allegations that don't make you sound operatic. Noah moved half a pace forward. Eleanor's eyes flicked to him, dismissive. You may go. He didn't move until Sophia gave a small nod. That night, in the loft, Sophia's hands shook too badly to hold a pen. Noah made tea on a camp stove and waited. When she finally spoke, her voice came out stripped raw. I keep thinking maybe she doesn't know. Maybe it's Martha acting alone. Maybe she's just... She broke off. But she looked at me like she'd already rehearsed this. Noah set a chipped mug in front of her. Maybe she did. Sophia laughed once, harsh. Do you ever answer directly? Sometimes. Try now. Are we in danger? He held her gaze. Yes. The honesty hit harder than comfort would have. She breathed in steam, steadied. Then we go faster. He nodded. Faster means smarter. We need chain of custody on every document, timestamps on scans, independent witness logs. If this goes to court, impressions don't matter. Process does. She stared at him. Again, groundskeeper? A beat. Noah looked away first. I told you, I've been around this kind of mess. He stood and reached for a duffel in the corner. I'll grab more batteries from downstairs. When he left, Sophia sat in the lantern light, pulse loud in her ears, and told herself to drop it. Trust the help you have. Survive first. Question later. Then the zipper on the duffel, half open on the bench, caught her eye. Inside were neatly packed clothes, a compact med kit, a slim encrypted satellite phone, and a leather folio. Atop the folio lay a framed commendation certificate she recognized only in fragments. Eagle seal, department insignia, and a name in block letters. Commander Nolan Reed. Sophia went cold. By the time Noah came back up the stairs, she was standing in the center of the room with the certificate in her hand. Who, she said, each word precise, is Nolan Reed? He stopped 2 steps from the top. Rain hammered the roof. Somewhere below, the old building groaned. Say something, Sophia snapped. Now. He set the battery pack down slowly. Put that away. No. Her laugh shook. No, I've done enough putting things away for this family. Are you military? Are you spying on me? Did my mother hire you? Did Pembroke? Who are you? He closed his eyes briefly, as if selecting from bad options. When he opened them, whatever softness she knew in him was gone. Not cruel, just disciplined, formal. My name is Nolan Reed, he said. I use Noah because attention follows my real name in places I can't afford it. She stared, waiting for denial that never came. Commander, she asked. Former. A pause. Naval Logistics Command. I resigned 2 years ago. And now? Now I manage Reed Global Holdings when I have to, mostly from a distance. She let out a breath that felt like breaking glass. Reed Global. Even in Greyhaven, people knew that name. The shipping empire, the infrastructure contracts, the family that appeared on business channels and Senate hearing transcripts. She felt suddenly foolish in her patched sweater, her borrowed boots, her fragile trust. You lied to me from the day you arrived. I omitted. There's a difference. Not when you're the one being used. His jaw tightened. You weren't being used. Then explain this. She lifted the commendation. Explain why a multi-millionaire ex-commander is trimming hedges at my mother's house. Nolan didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low, stripped of performance. Because your grandmother's attorney contacted me 6 months ago. Because a source in an international procurement review flagged transactions that matched old Lantern patterns. Because those patterns overlapped with contracts my family's logistics network once serviced. And if the fraud chain was still active, people with money and lawyers would bury it before you ever saw a file. Sophia's fingers tightened on the frame. Pembroke sent you. Yes. To watch me? To keep you alive long enough to choose. She recoiled as if struck. You don't get to talk about my choices when you took mine. I couldn't walk in as Nolan Reed and ask for access to your carriage house without triggering every defensive mechanism in this town. His voice sharpened for the first time. You think Eleanor would have tolerated me for a day? She thought of Eleanor's smile in the hall, of cut brake lines, of highlighted threats on anonymous paper. Nolan stepped closer, then stopped, careful not to crowd her. There's more. Your grandmother expected resistance from inside the family. She built a second release trigger. He reached into his pocket and produced a folded document stamped with Pembroke's seal. He held it out. Sophia didn't take it. After a beat, he laid it on the table between them. She read, standing up. Pursuant to Lantern Continuity. Addendum Final Evidentiary Packet, Lantern 2, to be released only upon personal petition by acting executor before the Superior Court Clerk, filed in person before midnight on statutory deadline. Proxy filing invalid. At the bottom, in Pembroke's hand, deadline. Friday, 11:59 p.m. Today was Wednesday. Sophia looked up slowly. You knew this. I confirmed it this afternoon. And you were going to tell me when, after another useful omission. Tonight, he said, after we secured the first set. She laughed, furious and hurt and exhausted. You don't get to triage the truth for me. I know. Silence filled the loft, dense as fog. When Sophia spoke again, her voice was steadier. If I file this petition, we go public. Not necessarily. You could file sealed. She shook her head. Sealed is how people like my mother survive. Quiet process, private pressure, negotiated apologies. She set the certificate down with deliberate care. No more. Nolan watched her, unreadable. Sophia walked to the dormer, pushed it open an inch, and let cold rain air strike her face. Below, Brooks' house glowed through trees like a ship lit for a ball while taking on water. She turned back. They called me unstable before I even opened a ledger. They cut the brakes. They're already preparing to remove me for morality. If I try to bargain for peace, they'll bury this and me with it. Nolan gave one short nod. Then we build for impact. Sophia picked up the petition notice, folded it once, and slid it into her notebook. Tomorrow we certify every copy, she said. Then Friday, I file in person before midnight. After that, we don't whisper. Outside, thunder rolled out over the harbour. Inside the loft, among ledgers and rain and the wreckage of one more lie, Sophia felt something settle into place. Not safety, not certainty, but direction. "Let them say I ruined the family name," she said. "I'm done protecting what it became." Thunder kept rolling long after her words ran out. They worked anyway. Nolan, she still stumbled over the name, set up a scanner on milk crates while Sophia logged each page by hand. Source, date, condition, identifying marks, initials. He photographed bindings, water stains, torn corners, anything that could prove an original had existed in her possession at a specific hour. By 4:30, her wrist ached and her eyes burned, but they had digital copies of 2 ledgers, half the letters, and the executor folder twice over. One set on an encrypted drive, one on archival disks labeled with timestamps. At dawn, they carried everything down in silence. In the kitchen corridor, Mrs. Finch was laying out breakfast trays. She glanced at the canvas bags, then at Sophia's face. "You've your grandmother's look this morning," she said quietly. The one she wore before board meetings. Sophia almost asked whether that look had helped. Instead, she said, "If anyone asks, I left early." Mrs. Finch gave one small nod. By 9, Sophia and Nolan were in the Superior Court Intake Annex, a grey municipal box with buzzing lights and bulletproof glass. Sophia took a number and sat under a poster about estate fraud penalties while he stood near the door, hands in his coat pockets, scanning exits out of habit. When her number was called, she stepped to the counter and slid 3 certified copy requests beneath the glass. The clerk took them, frowned at her name, and typed something. Her expression shifted into careful neutrality. "One moment, Miss Brooks." A side door opened. A deputy sheriff emerged with a folder. "Miss Sophia Brooks?" he asked. "Yes?" "You're being served." He handed her stamped papers. Emergency petition for executor capacity review. Filed by Eleanor Brooks. Co-signed by 2 Lantern trustees in Superior Court, Probate Division. Attached was a temporary preservation order authorizing Brooks Council to secure all foundation-related materials to prevent spoliation by an unstable party. Unstable party. Sophia kept reading. Allegations, erratic nighttime activity, unauthorized removal of records, delusional claims of conspiracy, inappropriate entanglement with household staff suggesting impaired judgment. Her throat tightened. They hadn't just moved against her. They'd scripted her. Nolan stepped in close enough to read over her shoulder. His voice stayed low. "What court?" "Superior Court Probate Division. 2 p.m. today." The deputy cleared his throat. "Also, ma'am, under this order, you are directed to surrender any original Lantern documents to designated counsel by noon." Noon? Sophia looked up, pulse hammering. "That's 3 hours." "Yes, ma'am." "Designated counsel is who?" The deputy checked the page. "Richard Mather, acting for Mrs. Brooks." "Of course." Outside, wind shoved sleet against the courthouse steps. Sophia stood in it without feeling cold. "If we hand Mather originals, we lose chain of custody forever," she said. "If we don't, they'll say you destroyed evidence." Nolan's jaw flexed. "Either way, this is about discrediting you before Friday. And removing me before I can file." He didn't answer, which was answer enough. By 10:30, they reached Brooks' house to find a black sedan in the drive and 2 men in legal coats at the front hall table. Eleanor stood with them, immaculate in dove grey wool, signing something with a fountain pen. She looked up as Sophia entered. "Good. You've seen the petition. You moved for capacity review in less than 12 hours. I moved to protect the foundation from improvisation." One of the lawyers stepped forward. "Miss Brooks, we're here for document retrieval per order." Sophia could feel Nolan behind her, still as wire. "The documents are in secure preservation with independent custodians." Eleanor's gaze sharpened by a fraction. You removed family records to unknown locations. They're safer than they are with your advisor. A tiny pause, then Eleanor turned to the lawyers. Please note, refusal to cooperate. Nolan spoke for the first time. She hasn't refused. She's asserting independent custody pending hearing. Both lawyers looked at him, then at Eleanor. Eleanor gave a cool, dismissive smile. Mr. Reed is no longer employed here. Security has his termination notice. So that was her next cut. A uniformed guard appeared from the corridor, awkwardly formal. Sir, I need your keycard. Nolan reached into his pocket, set the card on the table, and met Eleanor's eyes. You should have fixed the west retaining wall first. It'll collapse in spring thaw. Eleanor ignored him. Sophia did not. The petty practicality of the remark, in the middle of legal war, almost undid her. She gripped the back of a chair until feeling returned to her fingers. If you succeed, she said to Eleanor, voice shaking but audible, you don't just take this foundation. You leave my father buried under your lie. Eleanor capped her pen. Your father buried himself with softness. The words landed like a slap. Sophia flinched. Then the flinch hardened into something else. I'll see you at 2, she said. They went first to the Historical Society to secure witness statements before court. The side entrance was ajar. Inside, the basement corridor lights were off. Sophia's boots echoed down concrete steps to the map room, and by the time she saw the cabinet door hanging open, she already knew. The steel lock had been drilled clean. Their archival boxes were gone. Not disturbed. Gone. Mrs. Carver sat on a stool by the sink, wrapped in a blanket, grey-faced. A paramedic was packing blood pressure cuffs while she insisted she was fine. Sophia, she said when she saw her. 2 men came with papers, said emergency transfer, said delay would expose me to liability. One had a county seal. Did you verify with me? I called your number. It went to voicemail. Her eyes filled. I asked for ID. They showed cards. It's okay. Sophia knelt beside her. Did they sign chain log? They took it with them. Nolan was already at the ceiling camera mount. Empty bracket. DVR's gone too. No footage, no log, no originals. Sophia stood slowly, pulse roaring in her ears. She had scanned copies, yes, but in court, scans without recoverable originals were invitations to be dismissed as manipulated. Nolan stepped close enough that only she could hear. We can still fight with copies and witness testimony. Against forged service papers and a legal order my mother filed this morning? Her laugh came out raw. They planned this before dawn. At 1:58, they entered Superior Court Probate Division Courtroom B, soaked with sleet, carrying a binder of scans and affidavits. Eleanor sat at petitioner's table beside Richard Mather, who looked paternal and faintly sad, as if disappointed by youthful drama. Daniel Vane was there too, not as suitor now, but as counsel for Whitcomb's trust advisory arm. Sophia felt the trap click wider. Judge Halpin, thin and tired, peered over glasses. Emergency petition on executor capacity. Will be concise. Mather rose first. He was excellent, respectful, restrained, weaponized concern. Your Honor, this is not punitive. We seek temporary neutralization to protect charitable assets while Miss Brooks stabilizes. She has removed records at night, with a dismissed employee using aliases, accused established fiduciaries of fraud without admissible originals, and ignored supervisory directives. He produced photocopies of the anonymous note, reframed as community concern. He produced Nolan's termination notice. He produced a statement from a gala donor saying Sophia seemed agitated. Every soft word built the same wall. When Sophia stood, her knees nearly failed. My grandmother appointed me executor, she said. I have evidence of falsified entries tied to Mr. Mather. The originals were taken from independent storage this morning by men using forged authority. Judge Halpin steepled his fingers. Do you have proof of forgery? Not yet. Original documents? Stolen. Police report. Filed 30 minutes ago. Mather sighed gently. You hear the pattern, Your Honor. Nolan asked to speak as witness. Mather objected on relevance and conflict. The judge allowed only limited testimony. Nolan confirmed the brake line sabotage, the midnight opening, the document transfer process. Mather attacked his credibility by unveiling his alias employment and omitted identity. Commander Reed, is it true you entered this household under false name? Yes. So you deceived everyone in proximity to these documents. I concealed my surname. I did not alter records. Mather spread his hands. But concealment is your pattern, is it not? The judge's expression gave nothing away. At 4:15, Halpin ruled. Pending full evidentiary hearing Monday, this Superior Court orders temporary suspension of Miss Brooks's active executor powers. A neutral custodian will hold any recovered materials. No disbursements, no unilateral filings on foundation matters without further order from this division. Sophia heard the rest, as if underwater. Temporary, neutral, Monday. Friday's midnight deadline was tomorrow. She stood as the room emptied and understood, with clean, terrible clarity, what had just been taken. Not money, not reputation, time. The one thing the addendum did not forgive. Outside, courthouse flags snapped in sleet. I can appeal tonight, Nolan said. Emergency Superior Court Chambers review. On what basis? That my evidence was stolen faster than we could protect it? We challenge standing, over breadth, timing. She shook her head. Even if we get heard, it won't be before the deadline. Her shoulders finally gave. Not dramatic, just a quiet folding inward, as if invisible straps had been cut. I did everything right, she whispered. Logs, copies, witnesses. I did everything they say irresponsible people do. Nolan looked like he wanted to reach for her, and wasn't sure he had the right. You did. And it still wasn't enough. For once, he had no tactical answer. He drove her to the harbour and parked where the breakwater met the old ferry lot. Wind rocked the truck. Sophia sat hunched, forehead against the cool window, and after a minute she said she needed air and walked toward the seawall, alone. Nolan stayed in the truck until she was out of earshot. Then he put both hands on the wheel and bowed his head. He had thought discipline could compensate for deceit. Keep her safe first, disclose later. Sequence mattered, control variables. It was the same doctrine he'd lived by in uniform, the doctrine that had earned him citations and one memory he could never file away. A convoy rerouted through a low-risk corridor because he trusted sanitized contractor manifests over a lieutenant's field warning. 2 trucks hit an IED chain. 6 dead, including Mateo Ruiz, who had once smuggled him coffee into comms on a 70-hour watch and called him brother like it was casual. Nolan had testified, rebuilt logs, named names. The inquiry had praised his eventual transparency. Eventual. The word had tasted like rust. Since then, he had promised himself no more heroic timing, no more half-truths for strategic gain. Then he met Sophia and did it again. He took out his phone and called Reed Global Legal. His sister answered on second ring. You never called directly, Ava said. How bad? Bad enough I need independent forensic counsel in Greyhaven by morning. No press leaks, no corporate flag. A pause. This about the Brooks matter you swore you were only monitoring? He closed his eyes. Yes. And the woman. He looked through the windshield at Sophia on the seawall, coat whipping in wind, standing like she refused to be blown anywhere she hadn't chosen. She trusted me. I decided what she could handle and when. I was wrong. Ava was quiet for a beat. That sentence sounds expensive. It is. Done, she said. I'll send Keller and a digital chain team at first light. Nolan, if you step in publicly, they'll say you're seizing a local foundation. They're already saying worse. He ended the call and sat in the dark until Sophia returned, cheeks raw with cold. She climbed in and shut the door with care. I'm not okay, she said, matter of fact. I know. I keep hearing the judge say Monday like Monday matters. Nolan nodded once. I need to tell you something without editing it. She turned, wary but listening. In Norfolk, before I left service, I delayed escalating a corruption report because I wanted complete proof. People got hurt in the gap. His voice stayed even only by force. I built a life around never repeating that. But with you, I still controlled information. I told myself it was protection. It was fear of losing operational advantage, losing access, losing... He stopped, reset. Losing you before you had a chance to decide. Her eyes shone but did not soften him out of the confession. I'm not asking for absolution, he said. If you want me out, I go. I'll testify, transfer every contact and stay off your case. But no more omissions. Not one. Sophia looked down at her hands, then back up. I don't need perfect, she said quietly. I need real. You have it. A brittle, tired laugh escaped her. Good, because real says I may lose tomorrow. He held her gaze. Then we lose fighting in daylight. She leaned back, exhausted. After a long moment, she let her shoulder rest against his for 3 breaths before straightening again. Get me home, she said. I need to read every line of that addendum until I find a crack. By Friday dusk, the house had transformed into war by etiquette. Place cards in the dining room, silver polished, press photographer confirmed for an executive continuity dinner. Eleanor had decided to stage authority, and Greyhaven would attend in pearls. On Sophia's bed lay a black dress and an envelope in her mother's handwriting. Tonight, trustees will ratify interim governance at 10:30 p.m. Your attendance is expected. Further non-compliance will be entered into record. Under it, a second page. A draft statement for Sophia to sign withdrawing unfounded allegations and endorsing Richard Mather as temporary administrator. She read it once, tore it in half, and hid the pieces in her coat pocket as reminder. Nolan met her in the old potting shed with a laptop and 3 coffee-stained printouts. I found your crack, he said. Suspension order bars, active executor powers related to disbursement and control. The Lantern 2 petition clause says, personal petition by acting executor. They'll argue suspension voids you, but there's no explicit revocation of appointment, only temporary stay. So it depends on clerk interpretation at midnight. Or judge instruction. She exhaled. Coin flip with my mother loading both sides. Headlights swept the shed door. Nolan killed the lamp. A county cruiser stopped in the service lane. Deputy Marr stepped out, hat low against freezing rain. Commander Reed, he called. Nolan stepped into view. Here. The deputy handed him another order. Temporary protective injunction. You are to maintain 500 feet from Brooks trustees and any governance venue once proceedings commence tonight, and from Miss Brooks during those proceedings. You're also barred from entering Superior Court facilities pending review. Allegation of coercive influence. Sophia stared. Coercive? This is absurd. Ma'am, I'm just serving paperwork. The deputy pointed to the final paragraph. For clarity, distance limits tied to governance activate at 10:30 p.m. and run while proceedings are in session. Court facility restriction is immediate. Nolan scanned the page once and gave a short laugh with no humour in it. Filed by Mather at 5:40, granted ex parte. Eleanor's final move. Isolate her, strip her witness, force her into a room designed to document her collapse. The deputy shifted awkwardly. I'd advise compliance, sir. Violations arrestable. When he left, rain filled the silence. Sophia folded her arms tight across her chest. She timed this so you can't enter court with me. Nolan nodded. And if I'm arrested, they use it to prove instability by association. Then I go alone. His mouth tightened. I don't like that plan. I don't like any of this. She grabbed the petition packet, a flash drive, and the only surviving original letter from Celia Ward she had kept in her coat since the break-in. If I stay for dinner, I lose deadline. If I run now, she tells the board I'm deranged. Either way, she narrates. She moved toward the door. Nolan stayed where he was, hands visible at his sides, voice low and urgent. Listen, Mrs. Finch agreed to witness your departure time. I uploaded all scans to 3 external servers and scheduled release to state investigators if you miss check-in at 12:15. Sophia blinked. You set a dead switch? Yes. A breath. Then she nodded. Good. He took one step backward under the shed overhang, already honouring distance before the clock forced it. Greenhouse Path is clear for 8 minutes between valet arrivals. Take the east gate, not the drive. Bridge traffic is frozen from the storm, so cut through Dock Street on foot for the Superior Court Intake Annex entrance. You memorized patrol patterns. I always do. She held his gaze from the doorway, rain threading between them. Stay unarrested, she said. He almost smiled. File the petition. She slipped into the rain. Inside Brooks' house, music started. String quartet, measured and expensive. Voices gathered. Laughter rose. Sophia moved through the greenhouse shadows while waiters carried champagne toward the front wing, and no one looked toward the back gardens where daughters escaped. At the east gate, she heard her mother's voice drifting from an open window, crisp as crystal. Tonight is about continuity. Sophia ran. Wind drove needles of rain into her face as she cut down Dock Street, past shuttered bait shops and the closed ferry office, clutching the petition under her coat. At 11:49, she reached the Superior Court Intake Annex, breath ragged, hair plastered to her neck. The lobby guard glanced at the clock. Clock window closes at midnight. I know. She shoved through the metal detector, up the stairs into records for the Superior Court Probate Division. One clerk remained behind glass, already stacking files. Sophia slid the petition through the slot. Personal filing, Lantern Continuity Addendum, time-sensitive. The clerk took it, scanned the first page, and froze. He looked at his monitor, then back at her. Miss Brooks, he said carefully, there's a judicial hold note on your profile. Instruction pending Chambers confirmation. Her blood went ice cold. Pending from who? Before he could answer, the desk phone rang. He picked up, listened, and his expression shuttered into procedural blankness. Yes, Your Honour's clerk, he said. Sophia gripped the counter as the wall clock above them ticked to 11:56. The clerk kept listening, eyes down, one hand over the receiver. Yes, he repeated. She is physically present. Understood. He hung up and drew a breath. Miss Brooks, I have verbal instruction to delay acceptance pending a Chambers note transfer. Sophia stared at the wall clock. 11:57. From which judge? She asked. Probate duty Chambers. Name. He hesitated. Judge Halpin's clerk. Verbal isn't an order. Her voice came out raw but steady. Show me a signed hold. Ma'am, I can't. You can, if you're asked on the record. She leaned in, palms flat on the counter. I am tendering a personal petition required by a trust addendum with a statutory midnight trigger. You refuse filing without written authority. That refusal becomes part of docket challenge. The clerk looked toward the back office door, then back to her. 1 minute. He disappeared. Sophia could hear drawers opening, printers, a muttered conversation. She forced herself to breathe. In for 4, hold, out for 6. The rhythm she used when rebinding cracked spines so her hands wouldn't shake and split the leather. 11:58. The clerk returned with a thin sheet. No embossed seal. A faxed header from a private number. Judicial hold recommendation, it read, with her case number typed wrong by 1 digit. Her pulse sharpened. Your case number is P4176, she said. This says P4716. The clerk frowned. That could be typo, she pointed. And the judge's initials are copied from an e-signature block. Wrong font weight. This was pasted. I restore 18th century ledgers for a living. I can spot overlay ghosts. He blinked. Call Chambers back, she said. Now, ask if Judge Halpin personally signed a hold in P4176 at 11:56 p.m. 11:59. He picked up the phone with visibly unwilling fingers and dialed. Sophia heard only his side, clipped and professional. Then his expression changed. Yes, Your Honor, he said, suddenly straighter. Understood. He hung up, swallowed, and reached for the stamp. Judge Halpin says there is no signed hold. Petition accepted conditionally pending review. The stamp hit paper at 11:59:34. Sophia almost folded with relief and didn't let herself. Certified receipt. He printed it, slid it through the slot. Filed. The clock clicked to midnight. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket as she stepped back. Mrs. Finch's name flashed. She answered on the move. Mrs. Finch. Miss Sophia, they're voting now, Finch whispered. Music and voices swelled in the background. Mrs. Brooks brought a statement with your signature. Says you withdrew all allegations and appointed Mr. Mather interim administrator effective tonight. Sophia stopped cold in the corridor. I never signed it. I know that, and God knows that, but trustees are clapping anyway. Keep them there if you can. I'm only one woman with a tea tray. You're enough, Sophia said, and ran. By the time she cut through the greenhouse path again, her coat was soaked through, and the trustees' dinner had shifted into its final theatre. Coffee service, brandy, consensus. She didn't go through the service hall this time. She pushed straight through the ballroom doors. Conversation snapped off. Long table, white candles, silver. Eleanor at the head in midnight silk, calm as winter. Richard Mather at her right, Daniel Vane on her left. Trustees lined down both sides of polished oak. A photographer by the side wall lowered his camera in surprise. Eleanor looked up as if mildly interrupted between courses. Sophia, you are not on the agenda. Sophia walked to the center of the room, pulled the court receipt from her pocket, and laid it on the table where everyone could see the timestamp. Lantern 2 petition filed at 11:59 p.m., she said. I remain acting executor. A murmur moved around the room. Mather recovered first, smiling thinly. With respect, Miss Brooks, your powers are suspended pending hearing. Suspended from disbursement, not revoked. Sophia met his eyes. I checked the order language twice. You should have. Daniel Vane leaned back. This isn't the venue for legal argument. It became the venue when you tried to pass a forged withdrawal under my name. She lifted 2 torn halves of Eleanor's draft statement from her pocket and set them beside the receipt. Then she held up her phone. I'd like the room to hear something. Eleanor's voice cut in, flat and sharp. Sit down. Sophia pressed play. From the speaker came Alistair Pembroke's unmistakable voice from midnight in the library. By authority of the late Margaret Brooks, Provisional sole executor appointment to Sophia Elaine Brooks. Eleanor Brooks is expressly excluded from supervisory authority in this matter. She let it run long enough for silence to settle like dust. Eleanor's expression barely shifted. A private recording made without consent. Vulgar. Accurate, Sophia said. She opened her satchel and began placing documents across the table, one by one, not rushing. Certified ledger copies, donor cross-reference charts, a forensic note about duplicated signature pressure. Celia Ward's surviving original letter in plastic sleeve. I restore damaged records. That's my job. You told this town it was small work. Turns out it taught me exactly how to see what's been altered. She tapped the charts. These entries were built to frame my father. Same transfer amounts, quarter-end clusters, dead charities, forged initials, payout routing to entities tied to Richard Mather's advisory network. Mather let out a controlled sigh. Conspiracy stitched from photocopies. Then explain why two men used forged county papers to remove originals from a locked Historical Society cabinet at 1:30 yesterday. Trustee Bellamy frowned. Is that true? Mrs. Carver's voice came from the doorway, trembling but clear. It is. She stepped in, coat still on, one hand gripping the frame. They showed false authority. I gave a statement to police. Eleanor turned her head slightly, irritation finally visible. Who let her in? No one had to, Sophia said. Doors aren't yours anymore. Mather rose. This is precisely the instability we warned about. Emotional outbursts, staff manipulation, public slander. Sophia cut him off. State investigators are outside. The room froze. She reached into the satchel again, produced a prepared motion, and a pen. Emergency petition to transfer all disputed Lantern and related Brooks charitable funds into protected court escrow pending criminal and civil review. I am signing now, as acting executor, in front of witnesses. Eleanor stood at last, voice low and lethal. You will not humiliate this family in its own house. Sophia looked at her mother, really looked. At the perfect posture, the controlled mouth, the woman who had treated love like a liability line item for so long, she could no longer recognize it. You humiliated us years ago, Sophia said quietly. I'm just ending the performance. She signed. At that exact moment, the ballroom doors opened behind Mrs. Carver, and two investigators in state jackets stepped in with uniformed officers. Their lead, Special Agent Priya Desai, held up a warrant packet. Richard Mather, Eleanor Brooks, we have orders to secure all financial records, communications devices, and trust governance materials relevant to Lantern Foundation and associated entities. No one leaves this room until inventory begins. Voices erupted, chairs scraped. Daniel Vane stood, sputtering about counsel. Bellamy demanded clarification. The photographer, pale, backed against the wall and kept shooting anyway. Eleanor did not raise her voice. This is theatre, she said to Desai. My daughter is unwell and being coached by opportunists. Then you can say that in your interview, Desai replied. When Bellamy turned on Sophia, have you lost your mind dragging police into donor dinner? She held his gaze. No, I found it. Desai glanced toward the doorway. For the record, Judge Halpin entered a limited modification of Mr. Reed's ex parte injunction for supervised evidentiary handoff and chain of custody testimony only. Another voice answered from the doorway before Bellamy could retort. Chain of custody on every submitted copy was independently verified, Nolan said. Heads turned. He stepped into the light without the canvas jacket, in dark coat and rain-damp suit, no alias left to hide behind. Beside him stood a woman in a tailored navy coat, carrying a metal case. I'm Nolan Reed, he said, clear enough for the whole room. Commander, retired, acting here as independent guarantor through Reed Forensic Logistics. Ms. Keller can testify to time-stamped acquisition, hashing, and storage protocols on all digital duplicates provided to investigators and court. Shock moved through the trustees like a wave. Daniel Vane gave a short, incredulous laugh. "Reed, as in—" "Yes," Nolan said. "And before anyone suggests I'm speaking for Miss Brooks, I am not. She asked for process support. Yes, she made every decision herself." Eleanor's composure cracked by a hairline. "So this is what you brought into my house, outsiders," Sophia answered before Nolan could. Truth. Inventory took 3 hours. Agents photographed ledgers in dining side cabinets, boxed computers from Eleanor's office, bagged Mather's phones despite his protests, and copied the trustee's vote packet, where Sophia's signature showed wrong slant and pressure, obvious once anyone looked closely. Mather tried every lane: attorney-client privilege, donor confidentiality, concern for reputation. Desai met each with statute and warrant scope. He shifted to indignation, then to quiet bargaining in corners with trustees who suddenly wouldn't meet his eye. Eleanor adapted faster. She requested separate counsel, declined interview, and began telephoning allies from a monitored line with machine-like focus. "Stability," Sophia heard her say more than once. "We must project stability." Near 2:30 in the morning, Judge Halpin appeared by emergency video on a monitor wheeled into the library, robe hastily thrown over a sweater. He had the escrow motion and 3 competing objections in front of him: Mather's challenge, Eleanor's challenge, and Whitcomb's advisory complaint drafted by Daniel Vane in language polished enough to look inevitable. Halpin adjusted his glasses. "I am not conducting trial at 2:30. I am deciding temporary control." Mather went first, clipped and fierce now. Civility gone. "Your Honor, this is extortion by spectacle. Miss Brooks colluded with a deceptive former employee and an outside billionaire to seize family assets on fabricated records." Sophia stood when called, hands cold, voice steady by discipline, not comfort. "Your Honor, my grandmother's instruction excluded household administration for exactly this reason." Tonight, they attempted to ratify forged withdrawal under my name while an unsigned fake hold blocked my court filing at 11:56. I brought documents. They brought pressure. I'm requesting escrow so no one can move money until you have full evidence. Halpin looked to Eleanor. "Mrs. Brooks?" She sat straight-backed in the library chair she used for holiday portraits and said, "My daughter confuses grievance with governance. She always has. I have managed this family's obligations while she indulged in sentiment and scandal." Sophia felt the old instinct to shrink, to apologize for taking up oxygen, rise, and break. "My scandal," she said before Halpin could move on, "was refusing to marry for optics and refusing to lie about my father. If that is moral incompetence in this town, put it in the order." The room went still. Halpin studied her, then the submitted exhibits, then the timestamp on her filing receipt. "At this stage," he said, "the court is confronted with credible allegations of document tampering, coercive governance conduct, and attempted interference with clerk process. Emergency escrow is granted effective immediately, all disputed funds and related accounts frozen under court receiver. No unilateral authority by any party, including Mrs. Brooks, pending evidentiary hearing." Mather surged up. "Your Honor?" "Sit down, Mr. Mather." He did, face gone, mottled red. Halpin continued. "Executor appointment remains provisionally intact for petition compliance purposes, subject to Monday review. Any retaliation against witnesses will be considered obstruction. We are done." The screen went black. For the first time all night, Eleanor looked at Sophia not as annoyance or project, but as opponent who had drawn blood. "You think this is victory," she said quietly. "I think it's daylight," Sophia replied. Eleanor stood. "You've burned every alliance this name had." Sophia looked around the library, at trustees pretending to examine rugs, at officers sealing evidence bags, at portraits of Brooks' ancestors who had built schools and ports and, somewhere along the way, a fortress around their own fear. "Good," she said. "Now we can build something honest." Mather was escorted out 10 minutes later, still talking. Eleanor walked out on her own, chin high, coat buttoned, refusing help with the door. At 4 in the morning, the house was finally quiet. Not peaceful, quiet, the kind after storms when branches still drip and you don't yet know what broke. Sophia sat on the library floor with her back against the hearth. Shoes off, court copies spread around her like fallen leaves. Her hands were stained with ink from notes and signatures. Her body had moved past exhaustion into a strange, humming alertness, as if she might still be called to sprint. Mrs. Finch came in with a blanket and set it over her shoulders without comment. "You should drink water," she said. "Heroes faint too." Sophia gave a cracked laugh and took the glass. From the hall came footsteps. Nolan paused at the threshold, no closer until she nodded. "The injunction clock ended when proceedings adjourned," he said softly, almost apologizing for entering. "How legal of you." He crouched beside her, eyes searching her face for damage he couldn't triage with logistics plans. Desai's team secured Eleanor's office server and Mather's private drive. Keller says there are offshore mirrors. We'll have more by morning. Sophia stared at the dead fireplace. "I kept waiting for someone to tell me to sit down. They did eventually. I stayed standing anyway." "You were extraordinary." She shook her head. "I was terrified." "Those are not opposites." In the corridor, dawn began as a thin grey line under the long east windows. Sophia listened to the house, pipes ticking, distant gulls, one door closing somewhere upstairs where her mother had retreated. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now they can't move the money. They can't destroy what we already mirrored. Monday hearing becomes about facts, not your temperament." She closed her eyes for one beat. "Facts. I like facts." Nolan's voice roughened. "Get 2 hours of sleep. I'll stay in the front hall." She opened her eyes. "You don't have to guard me." "I know." The answer sat between them, simple and heavy. The Monday hearing lasted 9 hours and smelled like wet wool and old paper. By noon, state forensic analysts authenticated multiple ledger alterations. By 3, subpoenaed bank trails tied Mather's Shell non-profits to personal accounts and to procurement entities under federal review. At 5, Pembroke testified that Margaret Brooks had explicitly warned of internal suppression attempts. At 6:15, under cross-examination, Daniel Vane admitted Whitcomb had drafted contingency governance language at Eleanor's request before Sophia was served. Before, not after. Judge Halpern removed temporary suspension entirely, confirmed Sophia as acting executor pending full administration, and referred fraud findings for criminal prosecution. Outside the courthouse, microphones waited. Sophia gave one statement only. "My father did not steal from this foundation. Records prove that now. The rest will be handled in court." No tears, no theatrics. Just the sentence she had carried for 15 years. 2 days later, the Bar Association Emergency Panel disbarred Richard Mather pending criminal outcome. When officers led him down courthouse steps, he looked around for friendly faces and found cameras instead. Eleanor fought longer. At settlement conference, she arrived in cream silk and left, with colour drained from her mouth, after signing terms that stripped her unilateral control over every charitable account and placed Brooks' governance under external oversight for 10 years. She did not look at Sophia once during the signatures. At the door, she paused and said, almost to herself, "I kept this family alive." Sophia answered, "You kept it silent." Eleanor left without replying. 3 nights after the settlement, fog rolled in from the harbour and wrapped Brooks' house in silver. Sophia found Nolan in the greenhouse, sleeves rolled, repotting rosemary cuttings under a work lamp. The room smelled of wet soil and cedar. Rain tapped glass overhead in patient, irregular rhythms. He looked up when she came in, and whatever he saw in her face made him set the trowel down immediately. What happened? Nothing bad. She leaned against the bench, suddenly unsure where to put her hands. "I just finished signing the new governance charter." "Congratulations." I included a full transparency clause, rotating independent auditors, and community seats that family can't override. A breath. And a conflict policy that says no one can hold operational control through marriage, bloodline, or social position. One corner of his mouth lifted. "That would have complicated your mother's banker plan." "That was the point." Silence, warm this time. The lamp buzzed softly. Sophia looked at him. "You were right at the harbour. I might have lost tomorrow." "You didn't." "I know. But that night—" She exhaled. "I realized winning and trusting are different battles." Nolan nodded once, expression open in a way she had rarely seen. And I don't know how to do this if either of us is performing competence all the time." He wiped his hands on a cloth, buying himself a second. Then no performance. She waited. He met her eyes and spoke like each word mattered enough to choose carefully and tell anyway. "I love you. Not the crisis version of you, not the fighter everyone saw in that ballroom. You in the archive with glue on your fingers. You arguing with commas in legal drafts. You when you laugh at things you think you shouldn't. I loved you before I told you my name, and that is part of why I hid it, and I hate that part." Her throat tightened. He went on, voice rougher. "I'm good at command and terrible at being needed without taking over. I'm trying to unlearn that. If you want me here, I'm here, with my real name, real history, no omissions. If you don't, I'll still back your foundation from any distance you set." Sophia stepped closer until there was only a breath between them. "I wanted to hate you for the lie," she said. "It would have been cleaner, but even furious, I still trusted you to show up when it counted. You did." Her eyes stung. She didn't look away. "I love you too, and I don't want distance. I want partnership. Messy, explicit, argued-out partnership." His laugh came out shaky, almost disbelieving. "That sounds contractual." "I write governance documents now." "Terrifying." She smiled, then sobered. "One condition." "Name it." "No disappearing behind strategy when it gets hard. No deciding for me because you think it's safer." He nodded immediately. "Agreed. My condition. When I slip, you tell me before it calcifies." "Agreed." For a second they just stood there, rain and glass and damp earth around them, the world narrowed to honest terms. Then he touched her face, carefully, as if asking one more time. She leaned in first. The kiss was not dramatic. It was long and certain and quiet in the way truth can be when no one is trying to win. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I turned down a merger call this afternoon," he said softly. She blinked. "What?" "Singapore route consolidation. Would have put me on planes for 8 months." A small shrug. "I told them no, I'm staying local this year." "For me?" "For us, for what you're building, for what I want to build with you, if you'll have it." She laughed through a sudden wetness in her eyes. "You realize Greyhaven is going to combust. Let it." She took his hand and squeezed once, hard. "Then stay." "I will." Opening day for the restored Lantern Literacy Foundation arrived with bright wind and salt in the air. Brooks' house looked different. Same granite steps, but repaired. Same shutters, now straight and painted deep charcoal. Brass knocker polished to a warm gleam. The dead rose beds replaced with hardy coastal grasses, and children's reading benches built from reclaimed oak. Over the front door, a modest new plaque, Lantern Foundation. Brooks House Books, access, accountability. In the front hall, Mrs. Finch directed volunteers like a general. No cupcakes near the rare maps, please. Mrs. Carver arranged donated children's titles on long tables by age group. Agent Desai, off-duty and smiling for once, accepted coffee and promised no warrants today. Sophia stood in the library, no longer locked theatre, now bright with morning, and watched the first group of local students file in, boots squeaking on old wood. One little boy stopped beneath Margaret Brooks's portrait and whispered, "Did she live here?" Sophia crouched beside him. She did, and she left this place for readers. At noon, Alistair Pembroke handed her the final court order. "Administration confirmed," he said. "Your father's name formally cleared in all trust records." She took the paper, and for the first time, let herself cry, briefly, quietly, without shame. Pembroke pretended to inspect the window latch until she nodded she was fine. In the garden, reporters tried to bait her into comments about family scandal. She gave them governance language and public program details and redirected every question toward literacy grants. By the third attempt, they started writing down what mattered. Nolan stood near the side path in plain view, no disguises, talking to a carpenter about wheelchair ramp grade. Bellamy approached him with a strained smile and a donation envelope, eager to be seen on the right side of history. Nolan took the envelope, handed it directly to Sophia in front of him, and said, "Executor's call." Bellamy flushed. Sophia smiled politely and directed him to the public donor log table. Late afternoon brought fog rolling in again, softening the edges of lawn and harbour beyond. The same weather as the nights when the house had felt like a mausoleum. Now, lights glowed from every downstairs room. Children read on window seats, volunteers shelved books. In the old music room, a legal clinic signed families up for free document assistance. The house sounded alive. Chairs scraping, pages turning, people talking without whispering. At dusk, Sophia stepped onto the front steps with a box of old nameplates removed from interior doors. Private study, family only, staff entrance. She dropped them into a recycling bin one by one. Nolan came to stand beside her. Ceremonial? Cathartic. He offered his arm and she took it. Across the lawn, tourists paused at the iron gates and lifted their phones for pictures, just as they always had. But now, when one woman asked another what this place was, Sophia heard the answer drift through fog. That's the Lantern Foundation. They give books and grants. The Brooks daughter runs it. Not cautionary tale, not scandal, not ruin. Sophia looked up at the house, at windows lit from within, and saw not a memory refusing to die, but a future finally willing to be lived in.